Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our watch club for Marvel's Moon Knight. All right, time out, guys. Let's all calm down, yeah? Let's all just chill the F out and talk for a second. Welcome back to Watch Club. My name is Nate, and this is our Watch Club for Marvel's Moon Knight, Episode 3, titled The Friendly Type. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Watch Club, our weekly review series, kind of like a book club, but way better. Keep in mind, we will be going into full spoilers for this series and the MCU in general, so if you haven't watched this week's episode yet, be sure to do so, and then come right back in a snap. Now, before we all sit down for a meeting with the gods and then get imprisoned in stone, let me introduce you to the other personalities joining me today. First up, he's a Marvel nut who's taller than King Tut, but he doesn't have a butt. He's the Egyptian jackal, Justin Lawrence.
Keep my posterior out of my name, please.
Out of your... Yeah. I thought we were doing an Oscars thing for a second. That was a while ago. We're beyond that now. We're beyond that.
We're past that.
We're past that. And summoning him now to our beautiful Discord call. Let me clear my esophagus as he gets out of his sarcophagus. He's cooler than Konshu, but if you make fun of his mummy, he's not afraid to haunt you. He's Kevin, the Crocodile Hudson.
Hey, what's up, boys? I was trying to think of a clever Apocalypse quote from X-Men Apocalypse, and there weren't any. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to go with the standard hello.
They don't exist. They don't exist. I challenged you guys. I don't know if you have this ready and prepared. I challenged you guys to a beautiful BuzzFeed quiz. You know, obviously this week, and we'll get into this episode, deals with us getting to see the avatars for the various Egyptian gods. And I wanted to see, I sent you a BuzzFeed quiz for what Egyptian god they have BuzzFeed quizzes for literally everything. And I found one for what Egyptian god or goddess are you? So who would like to go first?
Well, mine is quite sweet. Given that even just a month ago on the Geekcentric podcast, I was able to share with you guys and all of our listeners that my beautiful wife Sarah and I are expecting our first child this summer. And so when I got Mut, Goddess of Heaven and Mother of Creation, I thought, well, isn't that fitting?
You absolutely are a mother of creation.
I'm the
100%.
motherly figure in my group of friends,
There you go.
Just the description, it's just perfect for me.
It's perfect for you.
Yeah, mine is also Mutt.
Oh, wow.
The Goddess of Heaven and Mother of Creation, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Given these BuzzFeed articles, man, how do they do it? How do they?
I feel
just
like they
reveal our who we are. Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
I was a little emotional.
Are you saying there's a reveal right now? Are you announcing something on this episode of the podcast, Justin?
No, not.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
No little baby gods getting popped out
Not yet.
on your side. Listen. If anything happens to you guys, I got you, because I got Osiris, god of resurrection and death, who was the most important ancient Egyptian god. So, obviously that makes sense. I think that definitely makes sense. And he took care of the dead on their journey towards new life, and would guide people. And I feel like, if you've ever met me in terms of especially through other means through my career, I've done a lot of teaching and guiding for people. And so, I think you just have to ask for help, and Osiris will be there. So that's the one I got. I don't know how.
It's not bad. That's fairly accurate too. Yeah, you're always our go-to for all things tech, and you're always a helpful hand. If I ever have a question about a game that I'm just wanting to fucking yell at, I'm like, Nate, what do I do?
I'm a gaming Osiris.
Oh, there you go.
Well, and I decided I was going to retake the test and just pick as close to the opposite of what my first answers were, just to see what came up, and it was Ra, the sun god. The giver of light and purpose to everything, arguably the most important of the gods to the ancient Egyptians. That's what I would have aligned myself with first. So I don't know. Maybe my own thoughts and understanding of myself are a little skewed.
It does seem like a lot of these descriptions are describing each of the gods as the most important. Like, did they all write them themselves? You know what I mean? Like, maybe they wrote this, they did this BuzzFeed
it could be.
Quiz.
Or their avatars.
Maybe their avatars wrote it, right?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. And I think, we're going to get into this episode and see a little bit of jealousy between a certain god and another god. So let's just dive right into this week's story. This week we kick off with, again, a brief previously on, and this time followed by a deeper look into Layla, and you have to assume also Mark's, forger. We see her share a brief exchange with Layla as she justifies her not-so-innocent lifestyle, and they reminisce over Layla's father and what seems to be a lifestyle that runs in her family. What did you guys think of this opener, giving us a brief glimpse into Layla's family history and this woman who I'm assuming is her mother, right?
Yeah, I think this is her mother. It seems like they're referring to your father in a manner that feels like, she has a relationship with him or had a relationship with him. That being said, again, I think this is, as we were talking last week, exposition just being handled so well. Yeah. Like, we're learning about the ins and outs of Layla in this very telling moment as they forge a passport very quickly so that she can leave the country. So two ways, both visually and narratively with what is being spoken on screen, we're learning more about Layla than some sort of flashback sequence that would take us back or anything that felt like it was so heavy-handed exposition. This was the right way to handle exposition again.
Totally.
And this is just another instance of showing just how dangerous of a life it is as an archaeologist. When I was in middle school, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And, I decided very early on that I wouldn't be able to handle the bugs and the scary darkness of crawling through tombs and whatnot, but just the danger element alone, I don't think I'd be able to handle it. I'm far too fragile.
I'm sure all the archaeologists that are watching this are just like, yeah, that's my life. Now everyone knows.
I've
finally
got 12 forged passports. I'm always on the run from law. Yeah.
I do want to say, and this is a bit of inside baseball, but Kevin, she reminded me so much of your mom, and just in that she's not only is she a badass mom, but she's also just like, no matter what, she's got your back. She knows that this is probably not the best thing for you to be doing, but she's gonna help you. She's there every step of the way, and you can see that this is part of the family business for Layla. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Justin. This is an excellent example of, in these Marvel shows, how you show their relationship while not necessarily having to break down every single aspect about it. You just show a beautiful, raw conversation between these characters without having to be so heavy-handed in saying, like, our family history or showing a flashback like we talked about we didn't want last week. It was just a conversation between her and her mom, and I thought it was really well executed.
It is exposition, but without laying it on too thick. It's letting the moment define these characters instead of necessarily having them have a conversation with each other that two people who know each other wouldn't have, but for the sake of the audience, would be saying things that, again, they wouldn't be saying normally. I like instead that this was a real conversation that we as the audience sort of deduce clues from.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That is it. Trust your audience. Trust that they will be able to piece together the elements that are being laid through this scene, through this conversation, to do what it needs to do in terms of just giving a little bit more depth to Layla and her relationship with her family, which, as this episode we will discover, it kind of does matter.
So then we get our Marvel fanfare opener, this time to the tune of Enta by DJ Kabu, which really sets the scene as we get, right into Cairo, where we left Mark at the tail end of last week's episode. And we see Harrow has used the compass to successfully find Amit. And then we get to see Mark really doing what he does best, chasing down these thugs. They've murdered Mark's target. And then we get this fantastic fight scene filled with blackouts that cut between a few moments with Mark both in and out of control, which brings us to this moment on the ledge where Mark wakes up having killed 2 of the 3 thugs, and then the last one ends up killing himself in the name of Amit, which I just thought was a really intense moment. What did you guys think of this first look at, not necessarily Moon Knight Mark in action, but Mark in action?
Well, again, you go to the rooftop scene, you see Mark in what obviously we have imagined that his character would be given the level of the mercenary background. So we get to see a glimpse of that. But I love how Steven just keeps stepping in, to
try and
sort of
stop
be
him.
the good guy,
Yeah.
like try to stop him, try to reason with him, which results in him putting himself in a cab, sending him to the airport, which I thought was so funny. And then he sees the guys and he's like, hey, let me talk to you. And then again, as he confronts these guys yet again, he is confronted by Steven as a reminder to just stop with this. But what was interesting is when we do get to that cliffside where Steven doesn't know who did all the killing, and nor does Mark. And it's just like, is there a third personality that we just haven't met yet? Like, I guess the assumption is to assume that it was Konshu, but again, in both instances, we've seen Steven and Mark interact with Konshu, so we have to imagine that, is there another personality that's afoot here?
Interesting.
Yeah, I had the same question. I thought maybe I'd missed a line of dialogue or I misunderstood the exchange, but I was a little confused about everything that had sort of transpired here. But just to really quickly go back to, I do love the idea that, we've been watching Steven wake up to have Mark have done all these amazing heroic things, and then when the shoe's on the other foot, it's like the wussiest, most passive aggressive thing. Like, I'm just gonna jump in a cab here and safely transport us away from the situation. I love that was his go-to.
And like, speaking of some comedic moments, I enjoyed I know it wasn't, but it felt like a callback to the scene in Force Awakens where Poe meets Kylo for the first time, when he's like, what are we, dancing? What are we, fighting? What are we going to do? It felt very similar to that very first interaction between the two of them, and Oscar Isaac just pulls it off so well. I love how he doesn't even care, like that thin mustache man and all his theatrics with the knife, and then he licks the blade, but Mark just interrupts him with 2 swift punches to the face. I thought was so awesome, because how many times do we see in these action movies and shows, bad guys, they try to do that stupid showy stuff, and then the heroes just sit there and watch them do it. Like, that's not realistic at all. So to see him like just fully interrupt him as he's licking a knife, like, it was so good.
That's our first real Indiana Jones moment, right? Where there's the swordsman and Indy just shoots him a couple times. I'm not dealing with this guy right now, So that was definitely our first allusion to an Indiana Jones nod.
And I also want to just shout out, like, I love how, even though Mark is really, you can tell at this point he's pretty cutthroat, you see his human side still show where, and maybe more of his Steven side within himself show, where he's sparing this kid as much as he can. Like how in the fight choreography, we see him change his hand from a fist to like a Will Smith open palm as he slaps this kid across the face instead of punching him. Sorry, I had to call it back. It's just cool to see.
3 weeks, no worries.
It seems like we bring it up every week. It's just cool to see his characteristics carried through, even in his fighting style. You know what I mean? Like, this was gritty, it was realistic, but it was also a really cool sort of character study of Mark himself within the choreography, which I think that's so well done when you can bring it to that level where you're like, I get a little bit of who this character is, even in the way they fight, which I just thought is awesome.
Again, that's part of Mark's personality that I think just really shines in this episode. Again, as we were saying last week, we spent the last 2 episodes with Steven, and at the end of episode 2, we've now transitioned to seeing Mark outside in the real world, if you will. So this is nice to see, again, more of that fighting style, that action that is oriented around Mark's character, kind of take front and center stage here to really, as you're pointing out, reveal the characteristics of Mark.
Well, and so many times in those first 2 episodes, we don't see what happens. We don't quite know what happens. It's just a
Exactly.
lot of Steven snapping back into it with blood on his hands. And so to see that, yeah, he is a good guy with a conscience, Mark, that is, I think that's another important level and layer to add to the character.
Interesting. Well, then we after Konshu, we see he gets the attention of the Ennead, which we learned about in episode 1, and Mark and Steven walk through a portal into the Great Pyramid of Giza. And I love how much Mark is just geeking out all over the place, like it's the Pyramid of Giza, Steven is geeking out so much, just freaking out over the pyramid, and I don't know, I just thought it was so well done. But we get into the Pyramid of Giza, and all the other avatars of the gods portal in to take counsel. We meet a very lovely lady named Yatzil, who is the avatar of Hathor, the goddess of music and love. And the other avatars attending are Horus, Isis, Tefnut, and Osiris, myself. They all listen to Konshu through Mark as he calls for judgment against Arthur Harrow, who gets summoned there, and he pleads not guilty and claims that Konshu is unhinged and reveals to the gods that this avatar suffers from multiple personality disorder. The gods agree with Harrow that he's innocent, and Harrow walks free. But then Yatzil tells Mark in secret, she kind of pulls him aside, that if he finds the Medjay Senfu's sarcophagus, then he'll find what he needs to find Hamit's tomb. So let's talk about this sequence. What did you think of this trial of the gods?
I mean, I'll admit that when the scene started, I was sharing Steven's geeking out at being in the Pyramid of Giza, and it all just sounded like such a great premise. I'm just not sure how thrilled I was with the overall results of this scene. I'm not sure I liked how easily they were able to just sort of dismiss Konshu's claims and instantly side with this Harrow guy's clearly not up to anything good, and they're just sort of, I guess their idea is that they have to passively let him do wrong before he can be punished for such a thing. But I don't know, it just felt a little flat for me.
I feel like obviously the gods have had previous experiences with Konshu, and so maybe that sort of justified their, it's just all Konshu again, being his Konshu self. That's why we sort of kicked him off the team in the first place. But, Yatzil obviously has some sort of past with Konshu. I'm wondering even if Hathor maybe had a romance with Konshu. I think would maybe that was part of their past. But I thought this was another interesting look into the sort of the rules of this part of the MCU. Hearing Osiris say that they've decided long ago not to meddle in the affairs of man, like I just got Erisham vibes from Eternals all over this, right? Where you have to wonder, with so many different cultures and gods in the MCU, do they overlap, if at all? Like, when do they overlap? I just thought it was again, it felt a little too similar to something we just got in our MCU of when we are working with these gods on Earth.
Well, first, I think what this really does show is that Konshu is a villain. If anything, he is perceived as a villain.
Right.
He's perceived as untrustworthy. And I would have liked to have seen the gods rather than their avatars, in all honesty. Like, if the avatars showed up and then the gods came out of them and they stood together and they counseled, I think that could have been a little bit more interesting, and also just given a little bit more identity to each of these gods rather than just their avatars. That being said, I think that there are some moments here that show that Konshu does have it tough. He is being seen as the villain, and I believe Arthur is that
right
and highlighting that, and also calling into fact that Mark has a dissociative disorder, that Konshu is exploiting, and that is making worse, not better, in doing that. And like, it is possible for Konshu to have had a relationship, and I think that that's kind of subtly hinted at in this instance. But if I was going to say that, where does the episode slow down? It's right here, because especially after like what was supposed to be, I was being set up as like a sort of cat and mouse sort of chase down answers, and we just immediately halt, and it kind of felt a little out of place. This feels like it could have been better towards the middle of the episode.
Kind of hit a wall. Yeah.
Yeah, and you brought up such great points about how there is almost an inconsistency about how Konshu is using Mark and Steven as sort of a microphone to project his thoughts, but the other gods are just letting their avatars hold the council. They're not sort of speaking through those avatars. So yeah, it just felt a little all over the place.
I mean, speaking of all over the place, I did enjoy, though, how it was kind of cool to see the avatars are clearly from like all around the world, right? Like we had one from Africa, another one was from Ireland, one from the UK. And I think it shows how far spread out the influence of these gods are. And I think it also, kind of speaks back to the previous week's episode where we were kind of thinking like, how the heck does Arthur Harrow have people in Germany, people in the UK, people everywhere? And this is part of that. But before we kind of continue on, I did want to just go to the moment with Yatzil where she says that he needs to search the black market for Senfu's sarcophagus. We didn't get this, but I really thought that we were going to get some connection to Sharon Carter here, which I thought would be kind of interesting. We did get something connecting to her in the next sequence that we're going to talk about. Let's keep going here. I think we see Mark kind of asking around on the I guess the black market. I guess that's where he is. Layla catches up to him very conveniently, oddly enough, and basically they share a lovely boat ride where they talk about their past history and they talk about the day they got married, which I thought was a nice moment between them. But they're on their way over to Anton Mogart, who is a rich dignitary and collector who has Senfu's sarcophagus, what they're looking for, like immediately. Once they get there, they see Layla, Mark, and Steven work together to uncover the secrets locked away until they're interrupted by Mogart and then Harrow and his men. Harrow destroys the tomb using yet another sliver of Amit's power, and then Mark summons the suit and proceeds to take out Mogart's security detail until he's interrupted by Steven briefly. And then Steven's impaled multiple times and then instantly gives the body back. What did you think of two things? What did you think of Anton Mogart and this epic fight sequence?
Well, I want to just go back a bit to the boat moment, which I think was great to kind of establish a little bit more about Mark and Layla's relationship and sort of revealing the fact that, again, based on the previous scene, it's established that Mark has been dealing with this disorder. Steven has been an entity inside of him for quite some time, and he calls out, I had it under control until very recently. Mm-hmm. So whether the fact that he has now been infused with Konshu's powers, did that bring that out? Did that break his stability? Who knows? Maybe that plays part in why Mark was selected, if you will. But that being said, I just think it was nice that we got a moment to kind of see the two of them. And I think the whole instance of Layla showing up, she referenced it before. I tracked your phone. I thought that's what you wanted me to do once you turned it on. So I'm imagining his phone was probably still on, or he used it and she tracked him.
That's easy. That's an easy way to say that.
They established it though. But
okay.
But was pretty interesting that she was like, no, you're looking in the streets of Cairo. I know who has this thing. Mm-hmm. So let's just go see them, right? So it was like that part was fairly convenient. I was like, oh well, that wasn't very hard at all.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah, when you're looking for like this treasure hunter aspect to sort of emerge from the show, and there's very little effort required to sort of solve the mysteries. And I don't know, maybe I just missed the point of it all, but I found this all very trifling. It all felt they needed
muddled
to create a way to have an action scene in the middle of this episode. But the reasoning for it, I'm not sure why Harrow shows up here when he's already found, what he's been looking for. Why is he leaving this thing that he's been searching for desperately just to go screw around with Steven and Mark a little bit? And I don't even know if our characters really needed to resort to this in order to find the tomb they're looking for. where they could just have tried to find a way to track Harrow himself. So it all just felt redundant to the point of creating a need for an action scene. And the action scene was really well done, but...
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment as well. I do feel like what they tried to do was draw it out, but it's kind of... We've talked about this in other past series where it's just like they kind of give you this piece of like adventure or mystery, but then they kind of answer it really quickly. And, you know, again, it just... Arthur Harrow already has his location of Emmett. And why leave that, like you said, Kevin, to go stop them so that they don't get to where you are? It just seems really unnecessary.
It was
it's
spinning
like,
wheels for
if
me.
he had
This
just
is
kept-
where this is the kind of slowing down and repetitive nature that bugged me the most that we've seen on the show so far. This is where the show, even though it was in the middle of an action scene, it still felt like the narrative stopped and it wasn't progressing anything.
Yeah, it felt like a MacGuffin for a MacGuffin's sake in this moment. But I will say that, the fight sequence was great. I think, you know, obviously we saw in the trailers the part where he opens his cape, but getting to see it happen again here in action, I thought was really, really cool. I think, you know, it also highlighted his healing factor when he does get impaled multiple times, which is not something they've really talked about or shown on the show, where he just seems to be perfectly fine. And I loved, when Steven just gets instantly impaled by all those guys, and then just is like, no, I don't want it. Take it back. And I also thought it was dope to see Layla kick some ass as well. And again, we talked in our preview show about kind of the mummy vibes that we got, and this was really like an Evelyn moment for her, where we get this, you know, badass black curly hair, you know, woman, and Layla just leaps into that guy like a freaking velociraptor is stabbing him. I thought was really, really dope.
Yeah, and as pointless as this whole scene might have felt in terms of really just leading us into the action, I think the one thing I really enjoyed was seeing Mark and Steven working together. And I feel that is so prevalent in this moment, you know, the way they're trying to figure out the puzzles and figure out the map and all this stuff. And, you know, the way he just... when he's interrupted by the guy with the gun and he just snaps back into his mercenary mode, it's you know, it's very telling about how fragile that those sides are. So yeah, if anything, I really enjoyed that we got to see more of a team dynamic between Mark and Steven in this moment. So yeah.
I will say though, and I don't care if this is expository or if it's pointless or whatever, we did get another, as I alluded to earlier, connection to the MCU, especially after seeing last week's Purple Magic, when Beck mentions to Layla, he says, after Madripoor, they have a lot to talk about. So there's no doubt in my mind that at some point Anton or Layla or both of them worked with Sharon Carter to acquire some of those pieces for his collection. I thought that was a cool connection, because again, it brings us into sort of a deeper understanding that this is maybe going to fit more within the street level of our MCU. You know, we kind of talked in the past about the ideas, and I know it's all over the internet that people have these theories of like where Phase 4 is going, but how they are kind of putting them in different corners of the MCU map, and to get a greater understanding that this is connected to Madripoor, that was cool.
Sure, and again, I think that this is just the MCU doing what the MCU does really well. They're referencing a city that we already know that has some shady business around it, and yeah, it's probably likely that the power broker could have been the way that, you know, some of this stuff had transferred hands, given the fact that Sharon Carter was dealing in antiquities and such.
Yeah.
So I just feel like more or less, rather it tying into or being relevant or connecting back, it's showing that Madripoor does have a place in the MCU that is going to matter, because we haven't heard about it since The Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Right. Well, hearing something instead of just seeing
exactly.
it. So then we get to the final section of the episode where we see Mark and Layla struggle to use the star map that they found from Senfu's sarcophagus. And Layla says they need Steven's big geeky brain to figure it out. He does figure it out, but he realizes that even though they have the map, they couldn't possibly use it because the stars don't align the way they did when the map was made. So then we see our first instance of not necessarily Stephen working alongside Mark, but Stephen working alongside Konshu to realign the stars in this really epic-looking moment, followed by Konshu disappearing as he's imprisoned in stone by the gods for making one too many, tampering one too many times with the sky. We hear the glass footsteps leading into the hall where Konshu is being kept, and we see Harrow give his victory speech, saying, I owe my victory to you. So, guys, what did you think of finally seeing Stephen using his true powers of knowledge, and then the imprisonment of Konshu?
Yeah, like I think, again, going back to what I was referencing in the last scene, here we get to see Stephen and Mark working together, and it's almost like a tag you're it kind of situation. And I really enjoyed that. I think that it shows that they are stronger together than they are divided. Like they need to work together to overcome whatever it is that the obstacle that's coming up. And that starry scene, like it was so good.
Oh, dude, the VFX were awesome, dude. And you'd have to imagine that that's being seen around the entire world, right? If that's the stars. So
yeah, no, 100%. But again, it was great to see Stephen. Like he must have a wealth of mental strength to wield that, and I think that's really great. And the fact that we see Konshu and Stephen working together, and just to see that dynamic, it's something that's very unexpected, especially for how much Konshu's made fun of him, right, over the course of the thing. But what I thought was really interesting too is when Konshu makes the decision and he decides to sacrifice himself, it made me wonder, like, what does Amit mean to Konshu? Like, she obviously must have some sort of importance if he's sacrificing himself like that. And could it be something like you were referencing, Nate? Like, could it be a past relationship? Because it's not impossible, right? For gods to have some sort of relationship or some sort of emotional connection. But I don't know, just the act that he knew what was going to happen. He knew he was going to be reprimanded, and he knew he was going to be contained. He decided to go through with it. And I just love that at the end there, he's asking Stephen to ask Mark to come get him once he finds the tomb. I just thought that was so poignant, right? So
because he clearly trusts Mark over Stephen, even though they just worked together. I also want to just shout out the Night Sky app on iPad for saving the day. What a great application. Download Night Sky. It's available on the App Store. This is a sponsored episode, so that's our sponsorship. I wish. I wish.
And aren't there star mapping apps and technologies that they can use to see what previous night skies would have looked like? This could have saved so much trouble, and now you're taking away my beloved Konshu for at least the foreseeable future, and locking him in stone. I was so devastated when that happened. It was so upsetting. There were other ways, guys.
Yeah. And talking about Arthur Harrow's, as you said, victory speech at the end there, I think this is just, again, peeling another layer to the onion that is Arthur Harrow, and really just revealing that there is an emotional trauma that is resonated in Arthur Harrow's character, which is enacting this revenge. Again, it comes from his time of being his fist of vengeance. So you have to imagine that there's an emotional and mental toll that's taken, which I think is just an interesting juxtaposition to what Mark's dealing with and what Mark's going through with battling Stephen. It's almost like Konshu birthed this revenge and this motive. So it's empowering.
You can really tell that he clearly has a terrible past with Konshu. It was probably pretty rough for the guy, and now he believes he's going to both, eradicate evil in the world at the same time as get back at his old boss in a way. And it just shows, I think this whole scene just shows just how personal it is for Harrow. for him to kind of be talking to a stone statue, which again just shows kind of he's all in. Like he's a terrifying villain in how calm he is, but then just how much this means to him. So okay, well listen, I'm gonna go ahead and let's just seal this episode in stone and give our overall impressions of this episode, which we're gonna be rating on a scale of 1 to 5 imprisoned moon gods. Justin, I'm going to get you to go first this time.
Yeah, well, like you guys have been saying throughout, this episode does have some slow parts, and it definitely, things feel very convenient, and, the action was great, but the lead up to the action was meh. But I got to say, there are still some great standout moments. And again, this episode is just a great example of how you handle exposition. From the opening scene with Layla and her mother as they build this fake passport, to the tender moment on the boat where we kind of get a little bit more insight that Mark has been dealing with his dissociated disorder for quite some time and never told Layla, and he thought he had it under control. And, until very recently, as he says, and, to me, that just means that Konshu probably brought that out and split that, broke Mark so that these two personalities are two separate entities. But in that, I think the beauty of this episode is showcasing how Mark and Steven are stronger together. Mark is the muscle, Steven is the brains, and Konshu's the power. And I feel like in this episode, we see such a ballet between all of these personalities or characters weave together throughout this episode. So I think that this episode, while not handled great, does have some strength. But I am going to be giving it a lesser score because it some stuff just kind of bothered me. Again, the convenience and how things wrapped up. So I'm going to be giving it 3.5 out of 5 imprisoned Moon Knights.
Okay, Kevin, how about yourself?
Yeah, this was definitely my least favorite of the first 3 episodes that we've seen here. I think we've now hit the halfway point of the show. I think they've done a really great job of really defining these characters, not just our good guys and gal, but really this does a lot to just show just how nefarious and hell bent on reaching his goals that Arthur Harrow is. And so that was really important to do here. I just questioned some of the methods and ways they decided to do that in this episode, as we talked about. And so it's a shame that the setup for the action scene left a lot to be desired, and yet it's still probably the best action scene that we've gotten in the show so far.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's that pure Marvel combination of humor mixed with excellent choreography, everything you want from a big Marvel fight scene. And so I just wish the context of that fight had meant a bit more to me as a viewer, because I was really just sitting there almost a little distracted going, but this is all just so pointless and redundant. It was a bit of wheel spinning for me in this episode. But again, where it stands out in terms of really strengthening our understanding of the characters, it helps to sort of bring the score back up a little bit. But again, it is a bit of a dip from those first 2 weeks, and I really hope that now that we've sort of reached that halfway point, they can start really driving towards whatever kind of conclusion we might be getting from this show. So with that, again, it wasn't a bad episode, just it left a little to be desired in certain areas. So with that, I will give it a 3.8 out of 5 imprisoned moon gods.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think more on Kevin's side, a little bit more. I think, to your points, right? Like the moments where I started to check out of not only this episode, but it felt like the series. Like I was kind of like, I really don't know. Like again, this feeling of, do I really care to see what is gonna be happening next week? I didn't get that from any of the moments that weren't the action moments, and then maybe the beginning, the very first scene with Layla, I thought was really well done. But just any of the moments in between action for the rest of the episode moving forward, it felt muddled, felt unnecessary at times. There were parts where, again, we talked about the idea of things being set up only to be immediately resolved. And I get it. Again, we're episode 3 of 6. You don't have a ton of time in a mini series to pull these points across. So maybe you don't need to make them as convoluted or complicated, or throw in as many MacGuffins that are instantly solved. And just to get to these fight sequences. Again, which, to your point, Kevin, this was a phenomenal fight sequence. And I also loved, again, how this episode did a even better job, I think, than last week's of showcasing, Justin, what you were saying, Mark and his skill set, and then Steven and his skill set, and then Konshu and what he brings to the table. So I really did enjoy that aspect of seeing Mr. Knight using his mind instead of his strength. But yeah, I think with all the other issues throughout the episode, this is where I think, and we talked about pacing in our preview episode, this is where that pacing really hits a wall. I want it to pick up, and I understand why they made it this way, but I'm also going to give it 3.5 imprisoned moon gods out of 5. All right, well, that is it for this week's episode of Watch Club. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts, if you haven't already. And if you want to write into the show with your thoughts or predictions on the shows we cover in Watch Club, well, Justin, immediately, go!
They can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach out to us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
Oh, you guys are like Mark and Steven. You're really getting the hang of this transferring thing. Well done.
Yeah, but I love how as soon as I passed it over to Justin, he wanted out of it immediately. He couldn't handle it. Keep in mind, we also have a ton of other episodes covering the latest and greatest shows and movies out now, including our recent spoiler-free reviews for Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Northman. We also have our interview with the Daniels that Justin did, who are the directors of Everything Everywhere All at Once, so definitely go check that out. Plus, we have our weekly This Week in Geek episodes where we break down the latest trailers and news every single Wednesday, which this week Justin and Kevin shared their thoughts on the latest trailer for Stranger Things as season 4 and the Spirit Halloween movie. There wasn't a trailer for Spirit Halloween. It's just they announced there might be a Spirit Halloween movie. Anyways, make sure to subscribe to get all that geeky goodness. Also, I'm stoked to say that now that we've made it through 3 episodes of this Watch Club, we will be bringing on a special guest next week for a Watch Club that will be completely... If you've been missing the speculation, we are going to be here to break down all of our thoughts as to where we think this series is going, catching up to episode 4 next week. I am so stoked. But for now, Justin, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me for this Watch Club. And as we say,
Later, skaters.